As we are continuing with our next speech of today, I would like to introduce Mick Keane. Mick is the Principal Digital Accessibility Engineer and Standards Lead at Optum, experienced in testing, training, and focused on web content accessibility guidelines. Even though Mick is huge on guidelines, I would like to mention a quote shared by him. Digital accessibility is about people, not just conformance. I think that this is a wonderful message sent
That's a
out
wonderful
there.
sentiment, and reminds us that while guidelines are very important, it's also about the people. Those guidelines are for real humans at the end of the day. They're not just bits of paperwork.
So we are continuing with Mick Keane with his speech on how to integrate digital accessibility successfully.
Hello, Mick. Welcome to QualityForge.
Welcome.
Hi, Joss and Santa. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here today and talk about successfully integrating digital accessibility. I hope to provide some helpful guidance, insights, and strategies on embedding digital accessibility in organizations based on my experiences. So I'll start today with a very brief intro on myself. I think a lot of that has been covered already, and provide an overview on the Center of Excellence at Optum, which I work on, to give an insight on how we approach integrating accessibility. And then I'll delve into the crux of this presentation, sharing kind of 6 key approaches that can help to successfully integrate digital accessibility into your org based on what I've observed over years. And we'll conclude with some closing remarks and hopefully have some time for Q&A as well at the end. Most images on these slides are decorative, but I'll describe any that provide a bit more insight. So very quickly, starting with myself, I'm a digital accessibility engineer at Optum for 7 years now. My journey in accessibility began at college or university, where a lecturer gave a class on accessibility, and it really highlighted to me pretty early on the impact that an accessible site and assistive technology can have on people. I went in and pursued a career in front-end development with accessibility in mind, but I was eventually able to have a full-time role in accessibility at Optum. And I've the last few years been a standards lead, and in recent years joined the mobile accessibility task force with W3C. Also, in the last year, I co-founded Accessibility Ireland with a couple of friends, and our goal is building a local community of advocates and awareness through educational events within Ireland. So that's enough about me. I want to discuss now the accessibility journey at Optum. So some background on who Optum are. Optum is part of United Health Group, and United Health Group is a parent company with United Healthcare and Optum as its 2 main divisions. United Healthcare essentially focuses on health insurance and benefits, primarily in the US. And overall, there's an estimated 444,000 employees within United Health Group. So it just gives you a sense of the scale that we're working under. Optum, the role they play, it's a health service innovation company. We focus on enhancing healthcare services and tech. And our mission, which I really love, is to help people live healthier lives and help make the health system work better for everyone. So our accessibility center sits within Optum, but we look at helping teams across United Health Group make their products, services, websites, and apps accessible. It's a simple but challenging goal. We want to make sure everyone, regardless of ability, can take advantage of all our features and functions and products and services offered. Our own mission is very closely tied with the companies, and that's to enable the enterprise with the accessibility training, which is very key, tooling, processes, and resources to make the healthcare system work better for everyone. Again, that key word is everyone. So how did we evolve in terms of a kind of guideline on the enterprise accessibility timeline? So 2013 was a very significant milestone, as it marked the introduction of the accessibility engineer role at Optum, the first person who. I think any team going on an accessibility journey, that's a really, really important milestone. More engineers grew, and by 2016, the Accessibility Center of Excellence was officially formed. And around that time, there was key legislation in the Affordable Care Act, Section 5057, that enabled our team to consolidate and drive an accessibility program within the company. Hopefully, the European Accessibility Act is going to do that similar within countries within the EU. 2016, we developed our Accessibility Knowledge Center, which is our provider kind of learning and knowledge resources in plain language for our teams. 2021, we published our engineering standards, accessibility engineering standards. And 2024, we launched Total Accessibility. These are programs I'm going to talk more about, but they're key programs in our journey. And today we have 50 accessibility engineers across US, India, and Ireland, with many work streams. That's a pretty large accessibility team, but as spoken of, the scale of our company is massive, as is the production of websites and applications. So how do we tackle that? We have many work streams, but there's 6 core ones that really how we kind of deal with that challenge. We have standards and knowledge, and this is the area I work in. We invest a lot in plain language and technical content to equip our teams with necessary accessibility materials for their roles. We also continue and develop and iterate our engineering standards, which standardize our digital accessibility testing methodology and basically formalize how we test our checkpoints. But we try to go beyond the web content accessibility guidelines, and our standards enable us to do that. This team also provides live and in-demand training when necessary. We have governance and monitoring. So this group provides assessments for a company and vendor digital experiences to identify the defects, gauge the risk, and monitor WCAG 2.1 AA plus compliance. I say plus because we aim to go beyond that. Enhanced support. So here is where our engineers actually get embedded directly on our product teams, providing continuous support across the software development cycle, including implementation and monitoring. We have a specialized PDF group that handles the large-scale documentation needs of our company. And we also have a digital disability inclusion group. And this work stream is really important because it focuses on the accessibility internally within the company, operating an accessibility fulfillment center that provides assistive technology to employees as they need it. We also plan and participate in numerous disability inclusion events in terms of global accessibility awareness day to keep building accessibility into our culture, build awareness, and try to gain advocates on our mission and support for people with disabilities. And then we have a special request and escalation team that essentially address any urgent issues that come through across any of those work streams. So that gives a little insight into how our Accessibility Center of Excellence works. But I want to delve now into kind of 6 key ways of integrating digital accessibility, considering some of those approaches that we've taken on and worked for us, and also just based on my experience. So number 1 is invest in people first. If there's one takeaway I'd like you to have from today, is that there's no shortcuts when it comes to accessibility. And I have an image here of a person running over a bridge. When you're going over a bridge, there's no left or right turns you can take. You have to go straight on. With the European Accessibility Act coming, my hope is that people and companies aren't looking for quick fix solutions, be that through tooling or having a fixation on audits and scoring. There's no tool, and it's probably mentioned already today, that can test for 100% of accessibility issues. In my experience, generally around the 30% mark. And audits cover a moment in time. So production and development continue after audits. And if you're not embedding accessibility into your processes, then accessibility issues are going to keep persisting. Some audits are done via automated scans, which goes back to that kind of tooling issue and on how much they actually detect. And then if you do get manual audits, and usually when websites are generally very large, they're done based on representative pages. So they give you a flavor how accessible your site is, but they don't give you the full picture. And that's not to dismiss. Tooling and audits provide great value. However, if you're focusing solely on them, if you're not focusing on people, you're not going to achieve kind of full compliance. And if you're solely focused on compliance, then you're missing the bigger picture. And it might sound a bit corny, but accessibility does go beyond compliance and regulations. It is about people. That's what it's about. So why invest in an accessibility engineer? Well, 1, user insight. So accessibility is about people. We create digital content for them. Engineers will understand the diverse needs of users with disabilities and the various types of assistive technology that they use. So you need to understand the user, right, to be able to create usable, accessible content for them. Breaking down and understanding requirements. So the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, are the accessible guidelines most legislation, including the European Accessibility Act, are going to refer to. It's a very technical document, and it goes through a fair amount of updates. Engineers stay updated with it, and most importantly, they can break it down into digestible pieces and relate it to technology and roles that you're using, be that web, React Native, single page applications, native apps. They'll connect the dots and give you that kind of full picture that you need. Team education. So the role of accessibility engineers is kind of changing, in my view, to be more focused on education than a QA testing at the end, which is where it needs to go. It's that process of shifting accessibility left, which we're going to touch on more. But engineers can work closely with the full product team and educate them on what they need to do to incorporate accessibility features from the start. And then you have legal compliance. So engineers will understand the basics of the laws and regulations. We're not lawyers, but we'll know what needs to be done. And that's why, while legal compliance isn't the sole focus by any means, it's really important for companies to understand. And then culture embedding. So accessibility engineers can educate teams about the importance of accessibility and will advocate for it, helping to embed it into the company culture. And having the right culture around accessibility is very important, which brings me straight into that next approach. So developing the right culture. Why is this important? You need the right culture to ensure accessibility is a core value rather than an afterthought. And that's where the challenges really come into play when it comes to accessibility, when it is that afterthought. So a key aspect of this is leadership commitment. Part of the culture in Optum, we speak a lot about the importance of a leadership shadow, and a very simple concept. I'm sure many of you have come across it before, and it's to influence leaders' actions, behaviors, and values have on others. So if you're a development manager, speaks about the importance of accessibility to you and in your goals, or your CAO gives an accessible presentations, and you're sending simple things like accessible emails, this resonates and trickles down throughout the team. If accessibility is not a priority at all the levels, then it's much more difficult to implement. So leadership buy-in is crucial. The next one, another way to kind of build the right culture around accessibility is engaging with users with disabilities. Bring them into your design and testing phase or development phase even. Gather feedback and insights, and have people with disabilities in your team actually building your applications. It adds immense value. Invite team members or external speakers to share their experiences. They'll build a deeper understanding and importance of accessibility and how it enhances the user experience for everyone, not just people with disabilities. And get creative. We have a very simple initiative a few years ago called Accessibility Pledge. It's a pledge for employees to continue to learn about accessibility and incorporate it into every aspect of the work. You register through a landing page, which is shown in the screenshot on the slide. And once they do that, they're given a snippet to add to their email signature and links to resources to learn more about accessibility. It's very simple, but it keeps that level of awareness around accessibility in the company and continues to build it into the culture. So next is create internal standards. And I'm a bit biased because this is my area, but I think this is really crucial. So we've dedicated a lot of time into developing our standards around web and native accessibility. These standards break down the testing checkpoints that we use, which are based on WCAG, and our own internal standards. They provide an overview of metadata around the standards, such as the priority level team should look at, the impact it will have on the users. They detail the core requirements, outline testing steps so that whoever may be testing the standard, whether it be a QA or accessibility engineer or dev or design, they're all following the same testing steps. And it provides templated remarks along with guidance around remediation and best practices. So we've invested a lot in these, but they've rewarded us a lot too. So they brought a lot of consistency. So as I said, we have a large scale organization, large team, and most even most teams do have large development teams. So it leads us to consistent results and reporting. WCAG in general is and it's technical, but it can be open to interpretation as well. So our standards ensure uniformity, and that's important to our users, because if they're using different products and accessibility is being implemented the same way, then that's a better user experience. It brings quality, so it provides more accurate results and reporting. Efficiency in terms of simplifying content, made reporting issues clearer and more concise to our teams. And then maturity. So having a robust set of, having a robust set of standards enables us to adapt to new technologies and standards. So recently WCAG 2.2 came out and released updates. That transition for us was a lot easier because we had a structured approach to implement and use WCAG success criteria into our standards. So standards and content offer a really good reference point for the team where they can learn and educate themselves. Investing in them early yields long-term benefits. Additionally, you can break content down to suit your development team process and specific content for the various roles on the team, which leads us very nicely into shifting accessibility left. It's a term that's very kind of out there and common now. I think most people might have heard it. And essentially, to me, what it is, it's really is proactive accessibility. And it's a bit silly, but I like to use a bacon analogy to describe it. So there's the image here of a woman and two kids baking. So imagine you're baking a cake for an event. You're putting a lot of time and effort to it. It might be 4 or 5 tiers. You baked it, and your guests have arrived. You serve it, but only 20 or 30% might be able to eat the cake because they have dietary restrictions. You can't take ingredients out. So you're probably going to have to scramble. Maybe you make a new cake or you go buy cakes. It's stressful, it's time consuming. Had you considered all the dietary requirements at the recipe stage, if you had kind of got those, then the process would have been more straightforward, less stressful, and you might have ended up with a better cake, but at least everyone could have had it. So similarly, accessibility is much less costly, time consuming, and simpler if it's embedded at the very beginning during that initial concept stage. It also results in a much better end product. Again, accessibility, reinforce that message, enhances the user experience for everyone. So previously, and still to this day in many ways, accessibility at times is seen as primarily a development issue and it's tested at the end, and that's where the challenges come into play. We broke down our own accessibility checklist to identify the primary ownership of each checkpoint. So out of the 77 checkpoints, for example, we tested in web, 45% were primary ownership with UX, 9% was with visual design, and 17% was with content author. So only 22 of those checkpoints, or 29%, had primary ownership with a developer. So that means 71% of the checkpoints could have been done before it even gets to development at an initial phase. So embedding accessibility at the beginning of your software development cycle will lead to much more inclusive, user-friendly, and cost-effective solutions. And how do you do this? Where do you start? We've been looking to prioritize accessibility for a while now, or incorporated left for a while now. And this year we formalized it into a model called total accessibility. And here's some of the key features within it. So one is create goals around accessibility. So include goals around accessibility for each role in your team. Give them a focus. Accessibility advocates and champions, look for those within your team. A champion is someone who will really be passionate about accessibility and push to ensure the goals and priorities around accessibility are met. New accessibility processes in that software development lifecycle. So include accessibility requirements in your user stories, your acceptance criteria. In your designs, add accessible annotations so the handover to development is better. Break down the accessibility requirements into role-based standards and checklists. This will help each team member focus on their specific responsibilities and be able to do testing as they progress. Tools and training. So developers especially can benefit from accessibility testing tools, helping them to catch and fix accessibility issues in the code as it's developed before it's deployed. Providing ongoing role-based accessibility training will help keep the team updated on the best practices and new guidelines as they come up. And then we have the ACOE, the Accessibility Center of Excellence, support and monitoring. So that's the engineers are there embedded on the team, available to provide training, support, monitoring, and mentorship as everything is going along. They're just some ideas on how you can consciously look at shifting accessibility left and integrate it into your development process from the start. I think we have two other approaches left. So the next one is taking small steps. And going back to the cake analogy here, and there's an image of a professional baker. So if you've never baked before, you're not going to start up a bakery straight away, or at least you probably shouldn't, or you're not going to apply for TV shows like The Bake Off Professionals after a couple of weeks. You have to set realistic expectations. If your team is new to accessibility, they're not going to be experts overnight. It's not realistic, and it will feel like a sense of failing. With accessibility, taking small steps prevents teams from being overwhelmed, allows for constant and sustainable progress, and ultimately will lead to a more successful long-term accessibility implementation. I have an image here of a child taking a small step / leap. The way we encourage this, we developed a training series called For Accessibility. The session focuses on essential accessibility practices for each role in terms of designers, developers, content, and products owners. For example, with the developer for Dev 4, we concentrate on validating HTML, using accessibility checking tools, testing with a keyboard, and testing with a screen reader. For practices that can have a really significant impact without overloading that developer, and they're not just focused on guidelines, they're practice that can influence and have a great impact on those guidelines. And then lastly is having your house in order. And there's an image here of a model house kind of sinking in the sand. I suppose a lot of us probably on the call today, if not all, have been in projects that have been mismanaged. And that's where projects have unclear requirements or lack of well-defined requirements, maybe scope creep, constant change. There's poor or no real communication between product owners, designers, developers. You might be having handovers or retrospectives, inadequate testing, rushing through the testing phases, having those big, large backlogs of defects. Or what stems from a lot of this is unrealistic deadlines, and deadlines that are too tight to allow for thorough work. Implementing accessibility into these kind of projects is very challenging, to put it mildly. And there's an image here of again, two model houses, one on a strong foundation and one kind of thinking. Approaches of being proactive with accessibility become very difficult with a lack of communication or the right culture. So you need that strong foundation to begin with when you're looking at integrating accessibility properly. So just to conclude, some takeaways I hope you'll have is don't take shortcuts, invest in people first, accessibility engineers, develop the right culture to ensure accessibility is a core value, create and invest in your internal standards, put time into content because it will have long-term benefits for your team. Shift accessibility left, be proactive with accessibility embedded into each role, and take small steps with your team. Have realistic expectations and try to have your house in order. You need the right foundations to embed accessibility. So with that, I think if there's any time, happy to take any questions.
Yeah, we do. I do believe we have about 5 minutes. Thank you for that. That was a great presentation. Outstanding. Enjoyed the recurring cake analogy. That was very useful, very good illustrative tool there. And I like how you've reinforced something we've seen mentioned throughout the whole conference today, that investing early in the right people, in the right tools, really pays off in the long run.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
yeah, without further ado, let's go into those questions. First one, on a personal note, how did you decide on leaning towards mobile app testing? Specifically accessibility testing.
Yeah, I suppose for one is being in that place at that time, for sure. Opportunity kind of arose. And then I think the role mobile plays in all our lives is much more important today than it was just, we don't just take a call, but for people with disabilities, it plays a huge role. And kind of fascination with emerging technologies brought a focus there. And then that approach of, the web content accessibility guidelines to begin with is very web focused. It's in the name. So how you'd map those, the theory behind all those success criteria into something that has a different language in terms of native mobile apps, and how we could map different techniques kind of really interested me. So being in the right place, and I suppose an interest.
Okay. And Mick, you mentioned, of course, that a lot of policies can be very complicated. So, and getting to know the different guidelines can be quite overwhelming. So where would you advise to start in terms of guidelines?
No, it's true. It can be like pointing any developer or designer to WCAG straight off the bat it's a challenge. So I think with people taking their first step, being curious is really important. Trying to understand the why around this is really, really important. So even taking steps of going to conferences, listen to talks by people with disabilities on how they're interacting with products is really important. And then trying to use some of those, like navigating if you're a developer or even a designer, navigating a website with just a keyboard, seeing how that experience is, trying a screen reader, seeing, kind of experiencing that assistive technology. And it gives you a sense then it's about taking small steps, looking at 3 or 4 things that you can start with, whether you're a designer, making sure you're going to just focus on contrast of colors, or being sure that you're not just using colors to define something, or looking at the heading structure. So just small steps, and being curious.
Thank you. I think that's a great answer. Another one, looking into your personal experience. From your experience, do you think that companies struggle with the integration process itself when it comes to accessibility, or is it a lack of vision on how the end product should look?
I think it's a bit of both, and a lot of it is down to, again, awareness and education. There is, going back to some of my points, there is a lot of still thinking accessibility comes at the end, and we can test for it at the end and it'll be fine. But when you test something at the end, using that cake, you can't go back. It's a lot more difficult to go back and go through all that processes. And again, it's looking at accessibility through the right lenses, how it impacts everyone. It's a benefit for everyone. So it's a bit of both, I think.
Yeah, no, excellent answer. It is about looking at it through the right lens. And as you said, with a cake, it's a lot easier to make the cake right the first time than go back and try to fix it.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So Mick, being the principal digital accessibility engineer and standards lead comes with a lot of responsibilities. So what helps you on maintaining a healthy work-life balance?
That's a good question, actually, because a lot of accessibility engineers do feel and get burnout a lot. A lot of the time, because they're trying to cover everything, and it's really, really difficult. I suppose it's about setting boundaries. It is really being, because if you're burnt out, then you can't really do your role quite well at all. So it's being strict and setting those boundaries, and there's always tomorrow. So looking at it that way, but I'm far from an expert.
Okay, we also have a lot of comments and
coming from the live thing, and I think we might be able to squeeze out an answer for one very quickly here.
Sure.
I found accessibility testing very time-consuming, going through an application page by page. I've not seen a tool that completely automates this. Is that something you expect to change in the near future? So perhaps the development of some of these accessibility tools, are they becoming more advanced, and is that going to make it easier in the future for companies to implement accessibility testing?
Yeah, like AI and machine learning is definitely going to keep going, and you are seeing improvements in terms of accessibility, even in terms of things like live captionings being more accurate, or transcripts, or in terms of how I would expect, without being a fortune teller, I would expect tooling to continuously improve. Whether they can ever get to that kind of 100% mark, I'm not so sure, but I do think, and tooling plays a great role, especially in the development process, but even the design and catching issues and helping out. But yeah, I would hope over time that we'll see more improvements.
Yeah, and I think you're right. We'll definitely see a lot of that. AI is really helping make those tools faster, more accessible, and easier. But that is the last of our questions, and also the last of the time we have today with you. So thank you for everything. That was an outstanding presentation. We really enjoyed having you here, and we do hope to see you again. Thank you again for being part of QualityForge, and please enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Mick.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.